What's up, guys? YouTube was down for an hour. I was on the line with Silicon Valley. I said, you have to get it up by 9:15 so we can talk week 10 with our buddy Shawn Siegele. We got Pat Kerrane here. Shawn, how you doing?
Good. Looking forward to finding out who I should put in my final waiver picks from the guys who know. And talking a little chasing OT. The team has moved into first place in points by, I think, 2. And we have an interesting dynamic this week because the team in first place in record has been it's been interesting because they're down toward the bottom in total points scored. The team we're competing against with most points, I believe, is playing them. So one way or the other, we might get a little bit of a margin this week.
Yeah, I'll pull this up here on the screen. This is the team that we drafted with Shawn and Colm over at RotoViz. As Shawn mentioned, we have now barely eclipsed Eleanor Higbee for points, but this hogs smell good here with over 200 less points than us, still sitting in first place. But let's pull up this team here. I'm going to go off screen so they don't fully see our bids here. As you know, Shawn, we're willing to give away a lot, but not everything. In this team, there's a combination of players that I just absolutely love. Having Kyler, Dalvin Cook, A.J. Brown, and Stephon Diggs. Does it get any funner than that quad?
Those are the guys right there. I mean, Dalvin with the 80 points over the last 2 weeks. And we have some pretty exciting players even on the bench. This is just sort of potential for this week. I got frustrated enough with DJ Moore that I moved him down for Ayuk here, with Ayuk having such encouraging games. We may have to look at that a little bit closer before Sunday, but yeah, this team is a lot of fun.
I'm with you on the Moore call. I think Ayuk is, well, obviously we want to revisit it, but that's the way I'm leaning right now as well. And yeah, you mentioned the bench. It's kind of loaded with some of these volatile wide receivers. Still, I would say we're probably looking for one more running back in the last couple waiver runs here. What do you think?
Yeah, hopefully we'll end up hitting on one of these guys, and hopefully Penny too. There continue to be sort of mixed but encouraging reports on him. If he got healthy and Carson stayed iffy, I don't think that's likely, but if that would happen, then I mean Penny has some huge upside once we get maybe not even to the league playoffs, but when we go beyond that.
Look who the cat drug in. It is Ben Gretch. How we doing, Ben?
Good. What's up, guys?
You know, we are just breaking down this team that we have with Shawn and Colm, and I'm over here sending PGA ownership to Michael Leone, who is in this chat. Mike, I'm trying to do a stream. I'm trying to talk fantasy football. Can't be sending you PGA ownership.
You got to pull up his other comment. I think is probably the one you should have pulled up.
Yes, I should put in a plug. We've been doing the Fantasy Football World Series live streams. We did one with the listeners on Friday, and then one with Leone and Gretch on Saturday. It's great drama watching Leone and Gretch bicker like the odd couple.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of fun. We're both pretty analytically inclined, and so I think we both sort of just rely on the other one to be grounded. Like it's like whenever I'm co-managing with someone, I'm usually more focused on the numbers than my co-manager, except for with you guys and with Shawn, but in a lot of other cases. But when I'm co-managing with Mike, I just figure he's going to deal with it, and I can get drunk and be the idiot for those events. So that's pretty fun.
See, Pat and I have tried that strategy. Who could be drunk and be the idiot? And it's the Spider-Man meme.
That's what me and Leone have been doing as well. We're finding out.
What happened on the Listener League draft is that Pete and I both had co-managers that weren't each other. And so we both went full drunk idiot. And it was bad because normally I lean numbers guy. And I got way too drunk because I got to be the full drunk idiot. It's fun being the drunk idiot.
It is. It is. Yeah, that guy's cool. Let's take him.
So let's quickly make sure here. I would say, Shawn, for chasing OT, I mean, we mostly have kind of small ball bids in right now for this team, not a ton of pressing needs. Is there anything that we need to discuss before this 10 p.m. waiver run with this team?
I don't think so. I did throw a few more small bids in, I think, but nothing particularly provocative.
Yeah, this team's in pretty good shape. We definitely are going to get rid of the Washington football team. Where are you guys at right now? I mean, this team, when I'm staring at it, it looks beautiful. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, Mark Andrews. And part of me is just like so frustrated with him. And then part of it, you pull up his box score here. He still has 3 games over 20 points. Like, he's shown us a nice ceiling. Where are you guys at on Mark Andrews right now?
Depressed.
I'm a little depressed. I think, the Ravens offense as a whole is struggling. And when you look at their schedule the rest of the way, it's not that exciting because the Ravens are this weird team where they can just blow people out and then the passing game doesn't get there. But they don't always, in competitive scripts, they don't always have the passing game get there. And then they also have played and will play some teams that play pretty slow. And they've played slower this year too. So there's like a number of ways that the passing game can fail. But I do think that Andrews does have a ceiling, and his underlying volume is like a percentage of the Ravens' volume is still pretty good for a tight end, kind of in that borderline elite tight end range. So I think he will access a ceiling in some weeks, and we just kind of have to keep plugging him in. I mean, obviously, the tight end position is so gross this year. What else are you going to do?
Yeah, Shawn, where are you at with Mark?
I think the thing with this team is that to be where we are with him being one of our really focal points for how we constructed the entire roster, I think that's really exciting because things are not going as well for the Ravens this season. We don't necessarily expect that to just completely turn around out of nowhere. At the same time, not based on schedule, but just purely based on talent, this is a team, and this specifically this player, I think more than the rest of the offensive skill pieces, you could see him taking a real jump, having that fast finish, so that as we head into 2021, he's right back up there as the guy that you want in this particular spot. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I've been in some leagues this week where Mark Andrews owners who were in first or second place were actually preparing for the postseason by selling him for guys like, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, who finally had a decent game. And they were asking for a little bit more than 1-to-1 back, but you wouldn't necessarily have expected that to be the case, a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I like this logic from Cobra, which is very true. Just pretend Diggs was your second rounder and Mark Andrews was your 6th rounder, and it doesn't look awful. I'd be pretty happy with Mark Andrews as a 6th rounder with this production.
He one of the things that I think is really interesting about Baltimore, because I kind of was expecting this to change at some point, and it's been talked about a lot, but they have played 8 games, and they've played 2 games that have been decided by fewer than 14 points, which is like pretty wild.
Yeah.
One, they got blown out by the Chiefs. Most of them, it's them beating teams by 2 scores. Like even last week, they weren't looking great early, but then they never really had to turn it on because their defense got a touchdown and the Colts just never got anything going offensively. That is in part because their defense is very good, but it's not necessarily going to be that way at all times. Some fumble luck could go against them. Another team gets a return touchdown against them or whatever. The Chiefs showed how teams can put up points on the Ravens, but then Baltimore didn't get anything going coming back that time. But those 2 games that were reasonably close, one was against the Steelers, and Lamar Jackson had a decent game that game. Andrews didn't. Jackson, I think, had his best game of the year in the other close game, which was against the Eagles. Andrews wasn't great in either of those games, so it hasn't proven the point that when they do actually play close games that Andrews could maybe be better. But I think the whole offense could benefit from having to try a little bit in the second half of games, and hopefully that can help Andrews. Yeah,
and they get Tennessee, they get Pittsburgh, they get Cleveland again, where Andrews had his best game of the year against Cleveland. He had his second best game of the year against Washington, so it's not like he can't have good games against some of these weaker opponents.
Yeah, I think the thing that scares you about it, he's now in that territory where it feels like he wins you your week or he loses you your week, which is fine over the course of the regular season. But then you get into those money weeks in the playoffs and you worry about just a catastrophic, disaster performance there that sinks you when, people are plugging in Ross Dwelly and getting 9 FFPC points. Like, that's really hard when Mark Andrews is bombing for you in the FFPC tight end premium context. Someone had mentioned Eno Benjamin here on this team. It was a guy that we know Rotoviz has been stoked on, Ben has been stoked on, Pat and I have been stashing him. He wasn't even active. We see DJ Foster getting the touches here. Is it time to give up the ghost of Eno Benjamin as it pertains to 2020, Shawn?
I think you've got to, because you've got to continue to make moves and look for those guys, even if you're bidding low, who might move in and play. At this point, we can see that it would take multiple more injuries to get him out there. I still really like him. Clearly Chase Edmonds has had a good season, but he did not have a good game. And the Cardinals did not play call well down the stretch, where you have Kyler Murray with those options and the way he's running the ball, for them to run Edmonds into the line to basically lose the game at the end last week, where, if they make that field goal tie, you get overtime. But there were some ways in which, it's hard to complain about 42 points from Kyler Murray, but that game should have played out differently. And I would like to see Benjamin get the opportunity to show what he can do there, but I do think you've got to move beyond it right now.
Yeah, Pat, I believe in all of our leagues where we own Eno, he's a drop for us this week. I don't think we're holding him anywhere, right?
No, we're not holding him anywhere. I mean, for him not to be active in that game is pretty rough at this point. Like they even had Jonathan Ward active. He didn't get any offensive snaps, but I just don't think he's very high on the pecking order.
Yeah. Gretch, any thoughts on the Arizona backfield? It did seem like Kenyon Drake returned to practice today. Should be interesting to see if he goes, how that split returns with Chase Edmonds coming off of that big 28-touch game.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping he's not back, frankly, from a Chase Edmonds perspective. Edmonds played 96% of the snaps. It doesn't really look like the secondary Arizona running backs are going to be very involved. But yeah, if Drake's back, you're probably back to that 1-2 split.
And Shawn, another guy we've been keeping here is Rashad Penny. Obviously, lots of shuffling going around in the Seattle backfield. We had Pete Carroll say Carlos Hyde is still a ways away. He said Chris Carson is ahead of Carlos Hyde, but didn't really say anything more than that he was ahead of Carlos Hyde. Rashad Penny, I want to say I saw a tweet from him. It was like one of those cryptic running back tweets about him being excited to come back. Are you still holding out hope that Penny could ascend to the top of the Seattle depth chart?
I think so. When you hear about he's excited because he's going to cut in practice or cut in a football environment, that still leads you to believe that maybe 2020 is going to happen, but it's not going to happen this week or next week or something like that. It was interesting this week to see Dallas and Homer playing together. Dallas so good the previous week, and then not so much in this past one. Obviously, they had to really attack through the air as Buffalo buried them right from the beginning. I'd be interested to hear the breakdown of some of their other guys, what people are expecting these peripheral parts to do, and how that might affect Carson, how it might affect Penny if Penny is available at some point.
Pat, it seems like what's so interesting about Seattle is like all these running backs have like such similar skill sets that it does seem like it could have like a winner take all proposition to it.
Yeah, Homer's a guy that I'm kind of interested in right now because he does have a little bit of a different skill set. I think he differentiates himself from Hyde and DJ Dallas a bit by being better in the passing game. So in the short term, he's kind of interesting, but Carson can play in the receiving game as well. So I'm not sure that Homer's all that interesting long term. I haven't been holding out that much hope for Penny, but certainly like from a dynasty perspective, Penny's interesting because Carson's a free agent at the end of the year. So you could see Penny ascend, but I've been pretty worried about his health from, the initial report, which was that it was like beyond beyond just kind of a standard ACL tear. So.
Yeah, let me pull up. This is the team we have with the four of us here, Robust OG. Right now, we have bids in for Kalen Ballage. Is there a bigger 2020 energy than bidding on Kalen Ballage in week 10. I mean, Shawn, could you ever envision him even being remotely fantasy relevant this year?
No, but I would like to say that whoever the Chargers pull off of the street and put in is going to look more talented, more explosive, a lot better football player than Leonard Fournette. So let's get going back there in the
Shawn,
team.
let's have higher bars that we have to clear here than looking better than Leonard Fournette. Is there a lower bar to clear? By the way, once we get through like waiver talk, I do want to pull up Shawn's most recent article on RotoViz that had some of the most savage charts ever, looking at running back production versus wide receiver production in the RB dead zone from rounds 2 through 6. We will pull that up later, but let's make sure we're talking through all of the waiver situations here.
I want to have that tight end argument.
Let's do it.
I want to hear. I want to hear our breakdown of these terrible tight ends that we were talking about.
Okay. Pete, make sure to check out the main event bids because we didn't really talk about them. And I added some stuff. So make sure to look at them.
I'll look at them now while you guys. So what Ben is referencing here is, so we have Dalton Schultz on bye in this league, and there's a bunch of very similarly projected tight ends here in this like deep tight end 2, tight end 3 range. I'll let you guys talk about it while I review Pat's main event bids here.
So the background here is that this team had George Kittle, and we were right about to make our move and get back into it. And then Garoppolo and Kittle both went down when we had them in the starting lineup. Obviously, Garoppolo, not a big deal going forward. Kittle, a huge deal. It looked like we were out of it. And then those receivers gave us 171 points this week. So now we're kind of right back on the edge, and making the right tight end call could make all the difference for us here.
Right. So, both these guys are kind of lower bid type of players, but when I was looking at the stats from this past week, Anthony Firkser jumped out to me a little bit because he ran a route this week on 60% of dropbacks, and he ran a route last week on 55% of dropbacks. And these are in games where Jonnu Smith is also heavily involved. Jonnu ran a route on 80% of dropbacks this past week, and he was at 64% last week. But Anthony Firkser has been getting a lot more targets. He got 9 targets over the last 2 weeks combined. Jonnu Smith, just 4. So when a tight end is getting targets at a high rate and getting a chance to run a lot of routes, that intrigues me. We have a situation here where Adam Humphries went down, and that's probably why, if you notice those percentages, they add up to more than 100%. They're passing out of two tight end sets. That probably has something to do with the fact that Adam Humphries was injured, but Adam Humphries has been ruled out for this week as well. So we would get potentially one more shot here with Firkser. He's probably going to get like between 2 and 4 targets, but it's not nothing.
I will say I am starting to become very intrigued with Hollister. And Ben, you wrote about him in Stealing Signals a little bit. Obviously, we have a bit of a tight end by committee in Seattle with the Dusty Olsen. We also have Disley involved. Are you excited about Hollister's role right now?
It's hard to be because Seattle kind of just goes all over the place with things. But yeah, he led the I pull up the wrong signals here. But yeah, he led the tight ends this week. I mean, I know there was some optimism about Disley even because Greg Olsen has certainly been playing fewer snaps. And so that's, I think, the big key. Olsen has still stayed as like the lead, but this past week he really wasn't. He fell to a season low 46% of dropbacks that he ran a route on. And Hollister was at 35%. Hollister actually played more snaps, I believe. I don't have the numbers pulled up because I'm struggling with how to use a computer. That's a complex process. But
that's what you said in Signals, that he was out there for more snaps.
Okay, and then Disley fell off, which was interesting because Disley had been the one kind of challenging Olsen more. So it's tough. There's 3 guys, and it's kind of tough to know what to trust. Hollister's certainly the one whose role is moving upward, and Disley and Olsen have both gone down 2 weeks in a row in terms of route share. So I know Shawn really likes Hollister from a talent perspective from a team we relied on him last year. So hopefully there's the role there for him, but certainly we think in this offense they're going to throw, they're going to give up points. There's a lot of reasons to like pieces in Seattle's passing game.
We have a question before we get to a decision here.
I think Kurt was in our Swolecast chat asking about Nick Vannett, and we didn't get to it. Where's the Nick Vannett stuff coming from? Just because
Alberto tearing his ACL and Noah Fant tweaking his ankle, and Jake Butts also on IR. So they're kind of down to the last guy here. Well,
Noah Fant, I believe, practiced in limited fashion today. So I don't think Nick Vannett has a path to his own back or tight end snaps here or whatever.
But you did see when Fant first came back from that ankle injury, he was clearly not 100% playing through it. And that's when Alberto got a little bit more work. So he could kind of be that.
But by a little bit more work, we're talking about one target a game in the end zone. So how much is here for Nick Vannett?
We're down in the muck here.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, my general thought too about all of these tight ends is I want to break ties in favor of the Seahawks, right? Every game they play turns into a shootout. Their secondary is awful. So, and then you're attached to Russell Wilson. And so I think you have outs here as far as the pie gets big in a lot of these games. And then on top of it, you might have a little bit of a signal that Hollister's role is also increasing. So to me, I like breaking ties in favor of Hollister.
Hollister's also been really good in targets per route run this year. Greg Olsen is at 13%. Disley's at 14%. Hollister at 21.5%. So he's the only one that's shown an ability to draw targets when he's out there, although these are all small samples because it's a three-way split, as Ben was saying. But it's nice that he's the guy that's now starting to get more run because he's at least the guy who's flashed.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a decision we have in a couple of leagues. I feel like a lot of people are feeling this. If you lost George Kittle like we did in so many teams, you're trying to plug him with Jordan Reed, with Ross Dwelley. You're trying to hit on these next tight ends. And I look at the guys that are available, the kind of guys we're bidding on, and you might get a spot start from Jordan Akins. You might get it from Ferkser. But to me, Hollister right now is the one guy that I could see his role really growing and being a difference maker relative to what's available down the stretch. I don't know.
What I will say is if you have a chance, if you're in a position where you didn't lose one of these tight ends and you're an FFPC and you're just trying to find some tight end value for the stretch run, Ferkser plays Thursday. So you can do the little look ahead move. Both these guys should be pretty cheap. I don't know that Hollister will even get added in a lot of these leagues this run. So you might get a chance to take a peek at Ferkser and then get Hollister on Sunday if you want.
Shawn, so now we're entering this stretch here where this is week 10. We have a lot of league playoffs coming up here, week 12 and 13. What are the things you do to get your house in order with these leagues and make sure, Pat was pointing out to us today after this week, anyone you drop in FFPC leagues can't be added. It's kind of a collusion prevention mechanism that they have in place. So there's these things that start to come into play. What do you like to do when you're doing sweeps of your teams to make sure you're setting yourself up to make a good run?
I like to just keep adding the best players, not worry too much about position, not worry too much about balance, although especially with the particular things we're dealing with in 2020, once you get past the point where you can continue to make adds, then that does create a little bit of an issue. And you have to decide, if you do want to do things even go with two kickers, that sort of thing. But the other thing that is kind of interesting in terms of the players not going back into the pool, and Curtis and I were talking about this a little bit as we were making our main event bids. If you're pretty even on a player with someone you have already on your roster, then you might think to yourself, well, I don't want to make that bid because I don't want to waste the money. You never know what might happen next week and if a couple of dollars will let you bid over. At the same time, if you take that player off the board and drop the guy off of your roster, then your league mates can't have him. So maybe you're loaded at wide receiver. A lot of our teams, based on the way we like to put rosters together, they may have actually 8 very good wide receivers. So you see someone come available and you think to yourself, well, it just doesn't fit. I don't need it. I don't want to waste. But if you can take that wide receiver off, even if you have to drop someone who's decent, then you're removing a player who could potentially beat you down the line.
Yeah, and that's kind of the similar logic too, like when we talked about Crack Rock and his cranking purple strategy too, of just this idea of any player you add, even if it's a redundant asset for you, that's a position that your opponents don't have. They can't play those extra picks at you. So I do think that's just a good note in general of making sure you're adding the best players, because it's not only for your starting lineup, but it's for your opposition as well. Gretch, what are the things you're thinking about here as we enter the home stretch?
I was looking ahead at schedules a little bit, trying to get an idea of who has potential shootout matchups and things like that. I think Shawn just hit on some good points there, but one of the ones that I was considering in my other main event team was that second kicker question, this, a second defense question, how to balance the bench, and didn't really come to any strong conclusions. Obviously, defenses can't get hurt as a unit, but I still, there's a lot of uncertainty this year. They just approved a modified playoff structure in case games get canceled. We obviously have a lot more cases increasing. There could be games that get canceled in this week 14 to week 16 stretch. So I'm leaning towards having a backup plan at most positions, but it does make it a little bit more challenging. Every additional player you're rostering, obviously, that's one less potential receiver or running back that you might need if you have an injury or you have those types of issues. So it's just balancing those things. The week 13 buys this week play in as well, or this year playing as well. So trying to balance the bench is a big thing right now.
Yeah, Pat, we've talked too about this year with the COVID uncertainty of carrying two players at these onesie positions. I feel like we've mostly settled into carrying two QBs on most of our teams, and just the way it's broke, we also have two tight ends. I do feel like that makes sense, especially because when we enter the main playoffs and you can't do add drops for weeks 14 through 16, that it makes sense to have some contingencies there.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're kind of already set up to do that. We don't need to necessarily be thinking about it too much, and it's something we've been trying to do through the bye weeks. Like if anyone became available, that we could kind of scoop up and make sure we had that second quarterback, which is something we did this year more than we have in years past because of the COVID uncertainty, but it's certainly paying off now.
Shawn, I know we're now at this point here where we're all wondering who are going to be these league winners. Who are these guys that are going to emerge? I think a lot of us had hope that these rookie running backs, your DeAndre Swifts and J.K. Dobbins and Gibsons, would start to pull away now and be kind of the hammer play. I know RotoViz was talking a lot about that. J.K. Dobbins could be this playoff hammer. Are you still holding out hope for some of these guys to have their role increase, or do you think what we're seeing right now is more reflective of what it's going to be like rest of season?
I think we'll still have some of the guys emerge. Because we're so close to the fantasy playoffs, I think maybe it feels a little bit more like we're down the stretch in the NFL season, where really we're just at the midway point, and we're going to see some of these running backs really fight their way through. And Pat was on RotoViz OT yesterday, did a fantastic job, to the point where we had to kind of flip our schedule, and we usually do the sort of clip or the guest on Thursday. We went ahead and did him with the Tuesday one. He had a lot positive to say about these rookie running backs, which I thought was encouraging, because if you are a Dobbins owner like I am in both Dynasty and in redraft, there are some very positive signs, and yet there's a lot of concern too. He falls into a little bit that same kind of issue where if the Ravens were just more explosive overall, then you would feel better about it. There would be more opportunities down by the goal line. They wouldn't have to worry about, is he going to get stuffed? Do we have to play the bigger back? They'd be able to, I think, incorporate him more as a receiver, just if the passing game was working. I do think those things are going to start to happen for the Ravens. So I think that he is going to be the biggest beneficiary, as we often see with these guys. It's easy to forget that players like Nick Chubb and Miles Sanders, who had such a huge impact down the stretch the last two seasons, they were kind of right on the edge of that at this time in those seasons. Now, maybe really starting to flash in the week 7, week 8, week 9 range, but the real damage was done later. I think we're going to see that, but it's definitely up in the air. Some of these guys too, like a Zach Moss that I know that we have on a number of teams, very positive signs from him, but the Bills are an odd team where They had a game just 2 weeks ago, very, very run heavy. Both Moss and Singletary look good. And then they showed this last week again that when they go out there and want to pass, especially against a defense that you can pass against, their passing game is fantastic. There were very few touches for the running backs in that game. Luckily, they went to Moss for Moss owners. I think that he will emerge too. But, we're definitely right on the edge in terms of some of these guys.
Sanders, I want to pop in and note, because I looked this up for Signals this week, and I thought it was interesting. Sanders last year, it feels like his struggles were really early. He actually had double-digit carries the first 4 games of the year. Week 6 to week 8 is when his role really bottomed out. And I actually referenced this, I think, when I was talking about Jonathan Taylor, because I was saying this is probably going to be the low point of Jonathan Taylor's season. But yeah, Sanders only had 12 carries in this 3-week span. It was his 3 lowest touch counts of the season. His snap count bottomed out at 18% of the offensive snaps in week 8. And he did have like a long touchdown run in that week 8 game. And then in week 9, his snap count came back a little bit. And then they had a week 10 bye. And then starting in week 11, he was the starter. I think probably week 9 is when Howard must have got hurt. But starting in week 11 is when he was the starter and playing 80+% of the snaps. And he played a big role in the final 7 games after their bye. But it was later in the year. It was week 6, week 7, week 8 when Sanders was really – that's when everyone was on Fantasy Football Twitter was saying, Miles Sanders sucks. Here's why he sucks. Here, look at the film. He can't hit holes. He's so impatient. He's got happy feet. He doesn't run straight north-south, and all these film watching takes are popping up, which, as guys like Shawn and Fantasy Douche would always write back in the day, that often those just follow the box score. A guy starts struggling, and then we see film takes that back that up. Well, we know the guy's struggling. We don't want to double count that. There's a lot of guys that we've been waiting, but we're not much further along right now than some of these past season breakouts. It takes a while. So,
who are you most excited about, Ben, of these rookie running backs? I mean, because there's quite a few guys, but I'm having trouble ranking them in my mind for this season. Between Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins.
It's so funny. My question was going to be, if you had to have one rookie running back rest of season that wasn't James Robinson, I do think he's kind of the clear-cut guy you'd want. Of the guys Pat was just describing, who do you want for the stretch run here? Shawn, do you have one? We'll go around the horn.
I think you want Dobbins, but I'm hoping it's Taylor. I have more exposure to him. Some teams where Taylor comes through, they're going to be incredible. And I think that the point there about how quickly it can turn around. If Jonathan Taylor takes a 70-yard touchdown in the next couple of weeks, he's going to go right back in there. Jordan Wilkins, very good 2 weeks ago. Everybody struggled last week. If Taylor doesn't fumble, and you can't fumble, right? But as fumbles go, this wasn't a LaShawn McCoy type of fumble where he just simply doesn't care about the ball. I mean, he fought that all the way down, and they made a fantastic play against him. I don't think that that's going to be something where all of a sudden, Jonathan Taylor fumbles a lot, was a real concern coming in. And so Taylor Dobbins, I want both of those guys to break out here.
Gretch, you got to pick one. I'm not going to make Shawn pick one, but I will make Gretch pick one.
I'll take Taylor. Taylor is gonna rip off a long touchdown run and not look back. That's Pat, what I'll say.
If you could have one, who?
I'll say Antonio Gibson. I know you like discount James White, Ben, but I think that J.D. McKissic is showing that there's a lot of receiving value available in this backfield, and we have a converted wide receiver in this backfield in Antonio Gibson. I think they're working him along. I think his role, he strikes me as the guy who there might be a clear plan for, that 4 weeks from now, as planned, he's taking on more work. Where I love DeAndre Swift, I would love to see him get more work, but I don't necessarily think the plan is for Matt Patricia to stop playing Adrian Peterson at any point.
I love the Gibson call, and I was gonna chime in and say it should be DeAndre Swift. He has looked really, really good. Yeah, but Matt Patricia is a bonehead, so we're probably not going to get that.
He could get fired, though.
I mean, that would be incredible. When I read in Stealing Signals that Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson each had 3 catches, I was livid. I was boiling. It's how is this a thing? I mean, Kerryon Johnson, didn't you say ran more routes than DeAndre Swift this week?
I believe so.
And Sean, I know you love Carrion. What's that, Sean?
He's actually looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. I think that if you were sending out,
you're defending Carrion.
God loves Carrion.
You want to put the guy that you want as the headliner, the guy that you're willing to sell as the piece going, and then just include Carrion to come back your way.
There you go, Sean.
So Carrion's your pick. If we included Carrion with all the rookie running backs, Sean might take Carrion.
We have 5 minutes left. Let's just talk out our bid here.
I want to circle back.
Still alive here.
Not to cut you off, but it is about that. You might have other names you want to talk about, but I want to circle back on Balaj. Are you guys worried about Troymaine Pope at all? He's practicing in full already. He missed last week with a concussion, and he played a decent amount in week 9.
And he played pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really get the Balaj hype, to be honest.
I'm probably team Pope, but I think they're both pretty even.
Because Kelly actually played more snaps than Balaj and ran quite a few more routes. And Balaj just got, the carries. He's kind of like the early down grinder without Pope in the lineup.
Sean, how does Josh Kelly surpass Justin Jackson in preseason and earlier in the season to where they feel comfortable with him as the complementary back to Austin Eckler, but then end up so far in the doghouse that Kalen Balaj is running ahead of him? Like, how does that happen?
This is sort of the Taylor situation, but with guys who aren't as important. And you listen to what the coaching staff is saying, and they're giving you the whole thing they gave Jamal Charles back when he was behind Larry Johnson of, won't hit the hole, isn't running hard. It's like, just let the guys play, right? But with Pope, he went in there and looked fantastic in the receiving game, which is the reason why I think you've got to give him a little bit of edge for the reason that Ben and Pat are saying there. Balaj, we know that he's a freakish athlete. So if you're opening these holes in this offense with Herbert now, I mean, it looks absolutely crazy. This is a good time to be sending out those Austin Eckler trade offers in pretty much any format too, because he now looks like he'll have the huge value at whatever point that he comes back. These running backs in this offense, you want a part of.
Yeah.
Where are you guys at? Go ahead. Sorry.
Just fifth in team high value touches, I believe, on the season, and it's been consistent. It's been solid.
Where are you guys at on these Dallas wide receivers? I'm debating right now with Pete of who we drop between LaMichael Pirine to try to get a starter in for this week, and Michael Gallup. Is Gallup a drop at all to you, or is that just too crazy?
I think you can drop him because he doesn't go back into the pool.
Oh, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
It's weird that Dallas has been using more 2 tight end sets the last couple weeks, probably to help with blocking. And so CeeDee Lamb has been running fewer routes, but he's so good that his targets per out run are really high. But it has helped Gallup, I think, a little bit to be one of only 2 receivers on some routes.
But I think that's right. I don't know why they're pulling CeeDee Lamb off so much. It makes no sense.
Weird. It makes no sense.
Yeah, my only thing too. Okay, for Pirine has the bye this week. It did seem like he had a slight role reduction this week, and also Gilbert looked better for the offense, and they were going against the Steelers too. I don't think the sledding is going to be as tough going forward. I don't know. I don't see a path to Pirine being a league winner right now with how stubborn they are with Frank Gore involved.
I'm just thinking about a guy who can be starting for us, and it's just Frank Gore.
Well,
brains his ankle and not starting.
They came out and said they're going to use him more. Pirine,
yeah, you trust Adam Gase, Ben?
Say it again this week, so a little bit on, how seriously you take that. But
we could just delete the bid and make it a Sunday bid, Pete.
Yeah, I think we need to, with 1 minute left, deleting the bid here.
Is that what you want to do?
You guys got 30 seconds.
Let's run it down. No, let me pull this up here. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of don't want to drop. I mean, this team is hurting at wide receiver too.
Yeah, but it's 4 wide receivers that we'd be dropping him for. Be dropping him for Richie James or Nelson Aguilar.
But you're dropping him for spot starts that I don't like. Is Richie James over Trey Burton this week that big of a
3, 2?
I already deleted it.
Okay.
This is how Pat and I do all of our shit. It's just a disaster.
We could have talked about this at 4:30, but we didn't.
Yeah. This was an interesting one. I did see some people talking about Ryan Null. We won't check your spelling on that one, Rathif.
Ryan the Grassy Knoll.
The grassy knoll. There was 3 shooters on the grassy knoll: David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, and Ryan Null. Shawn, you were writing up. Although I think Blair had the NFC this week, but you got any takes on Ryan Null?
Anybody who's not David Montgomery, right?
Right.
You know, when you have the receiving there, and even though Montgomery, that's actually something he's a little better at than the running into the line part. I do think that
He's pretty good at running into the line. Give him credit.
There's a potential there with what the Bears are going to need to do on offense. And so, Blair and I have this team that's incredibly fun because it legitimately has 6 top 15 wide receivers. And yet we barely missed on Robinson in the first bid, and we have been blowing it all the way through ever since. And so we're just 6-3, despite the fact that these receivers, put up 100 points every week. And if you're in that kind of situation, then I think he's an interesting guy. We have McKissick that we can really anchor our running backs around. So beyond that, he's interesting.
Well, now that we do have Locke, we can kind of go through here and look at some of our bids. So Pat and I, this main event team has been heartbreaking because Pat and I thought it was our best main event team. It was a Dak double stack that also had Christian McCaffrey and Aaron Jones. And obviously it just got absolutely wiped out. We're now emptying the clip on Duke Johnson just to get a spot start so we don't have to play Gus Edwards. I mean, Pat, we're kind of holding on for dear life here, right?
Yeah, we really are. It's tough when you lose McCaffrey. Like, we had McCaffrey coming back, and now he's got the shoulder injury, and now we got to figure it out again. I mean, at least we have Aaron Jones heading into this matchup with the Jaguars, and he looked fully healthy. So we're going to need some big weeks. That's kind of why I was thinking we go for the spot start play with Gallup on bye, which we still have access to, obviously, in the Sunday run. But yeah, we need points. We need points this week.
Yeah. So we'll circle back. We'll see if our bid here, 306, we had 388 remaining. And we're playing our buddy Crack Rock in this league. We'll see if that bid gets it done. And our other main event team, this team is doing really nice. Even though the record doesn't jump out here. I mean, we're sitting here 13-25, still first in points in this league. This was the team we drafted as the slow main event draft back in July here, and just playing some small ball here, dropping Eno for some running back stashes. And actually, this is a good topic here. Shawn and Ben, where are you guys at with DeAndre Washington? I know we were all kind of excited about DeAndre potentially being the handcuff in Kansas City. That didn't work out. Then the Dolphins trade for him. Lots of uncertainty in the Dolphins backfield right now. Does DeAndre Washington have some legs as a guy who could get some burn, or where are you guys at with him?
He was my top running back this week, and it was cheap, but I had him as like over Balaj. I don't think it was a coincidence that they announced the trade for him and the injury to Gaskin back to back, and then if you assume that those were correlated to some degree, and then you look at what happened last week, we all sort of expected Howard and Laird to be the two guys. But rookie UDFA Savon Ahmed comes in and leads the team in snaps. Washington had to sit out for COVID reasons. And I just took that as, okay, Laird is clearly just special teams, or they're not gonna give him enough work. I know.
Just be careful.
Close personal friend. I know that's a tough
I will boot you off the stream if you get out of line here.
And Jordan Howard's a guy that they don't want at all.
Yeah.
Like, they don't want to use. And so Washington's going to be active next week. Gaskin is still hurt. Breida could be back, but even if he's back and active, he's mostly been in this 20 to 30% snap range. And with a bum hammy, even if he is active, I don't see him being a 50% snap share guy next week. I think what happened with Ahmed last week, where he led the backfield with 45 to 50% of the snaps, depending on who's up on Sunday, that could happen to Washington this week pretty easily, where I think it could even be higher. It could be 50, 60% snap share for him in his first game, like Ahmed last week, like Gaskin, sort of surprisingly in week 1. They've shown that a couple of times that when they're ready with the back, they'll run with him. And it's not going to be Howard. It's not going to be Laird, but they might just deactivate Ahmed again and go with Washington, Howard, and Laird this week, or Washington, Breida, and Laird if Breida's ready to go. And I think in those scenarios, I'd be comfortable starting Washington, thinking that he's going to lead and have 50 to 60% of the snaps.
Notice how there's only one constant in that backfield, and it is Patrick Laird. Shawn, it is illegal to talk about your best ball shares, but do these DeAndre Washington best ball shares, do they have some life?
Washington is more athletic, and he's a better pass catcher than a lot of people he plays behind on the different teams that he's on. And so that's the interesting question, I think, when he's buried so much by the Raiders, but then when they finally play him, he looks fantastic. He's buried behind guys on the Chiefs who are not NFL talents. And so that obviously raises red flags. But I think Ben's point about how well his profile fits what Miami needs, and just that it is so wide open right there. Yeah, if you have room on your roster and he's not owned, you want to stash him.
So we'll check here. These were the robust OG bids we were talking about, dropping Hasty here. We got Balaj, Penny, McFarland in the mix, doing a little moving and shaking at defense here, trying to get a nice hammer play with the Saints. Dropping Jeremy McNichols as well. I think Deontay Foreman coming on has kind of taken the bloom off the rose as far as the handcuffs in Tennessee. And then here was our tight end decision here, ultimately splitting the difference with Hollister, Irv Smith, and Ferkser here. So we will check on these in a few seconds. I also wanted to pop over our quad bids, another team where we lost George Kittle, very much hurts. I mean, talk about a 0 RB team now looking at starting 3 running backs this week. That's just what kind of year this has been. And then over in Chasing OT, this is the team we were talking about with Shawn at the top of the show. That's in a really nice place right now, and just doing some regular churning and maintenance here. Pat, do you think these bids have gone through here if I refresh?
Our main event bids did go through, so you can go back.
We got Duke.
Nice.
We got him.
Nice.
All right, we needed that. It was enough. The Duke spot start comes in, has 20 touches, 16 carries, 4 targets. And the quote already came out today that they don't expect David Johnson to play. So even a spot start from Duke right now feels pretty good to take Gus Edwards out of the starting lineup.
Feels pretty good, man.
Let's see what happened in this one. Actually, not too much intrigue here.
Well, we got DeAndre in this one.
We did get DeAndre Washington. There we go.
Yep.
There we go. So we'll check in here on these FFPC bids in a second. I also want to pull up Shawn's recent article on RotoViz here.
While you're doing that, Shawn, yeah. I want to get your take on a player that was available in a league, and I just stashed this week a different main event. Henry Ruggs, where are you at on him?
I think you want to include him in those dynasty trade offers, but the way the Raiders are playing it, it's crazy to think that Derek Carr would be having this sort of mini breakout season and yet not really getting much anything from those rookie wide receivers. I mean, Ruggs gets open, and yet at the same time, we're already seeing some of the concerns where he's got this unbelievable speed. He's got the big hands. He can get open deep. I think that one of the concerns is just that can Derek Carr throw those passes, but the touchdown pass that he threw to Nelson Aguilar this week was, one of the most beautiful passes that you will ever see, right? So, I mean, if Ruggs gets open deep, you hope that he can make some of those plays, but they're already starting to do the handoffs to him, which, I think is one of those red flags where when guys can't run their routes properly or just don't, for whatever reason, can't translate that freakish athleticism into being a good wide receiver, you have that little bit of the Cordero Patterson kind of dynamic. Now, I think you still want to acquire him, but it's hard to see him doing anything in redraft, at least for several more weeks. And we would need to see his volume start to spike before almost before he's rosterable, much less someone that we could put him in.
Yeah, he kind of the situation on the Raiders reminds me a little bit of the Chargers, where they've got the two deep threat wide receivers and then a guy operating, just kind of feasting underneath the guy in the Chargers being Keenan Allen, but with the Raiders being Darren Waller. And I think Ruggs, it's like with Derek Carr, we know that Carr can throw deep, as you mentioned, like he'll put some really great deep throws on film, but he doesn't really want to throw deep. So I think Ruggs is better for the offense than the offense is for Ruggs.
Which was sort of the concern coming in, so it shouldn't really be that surprising. I mean, that was sort of the book on Carr this offseason.
Yeah. I think we've also gotten a little spoiled with all of these rookie wide receivers too, and expecting them all to explode as quickly as we want. And I think Nelson Aguilar's involvement in this offense too has really hurt some of these other pieces, specifically Ruggs. I mean, he has, I believe it was the biggest yards per reception. He's at like 24 yards per reception right now, Nelson Aguilar. Like that's what you expected Henry Ruggs to be at. So that really hurts his involvement. I'm going to pull up this question, and I feel sick to my stomach doing it. I'm worried we're going to be very wrong about Antonio Brown, guys. Talk about his usage. It was pretty massive there, even though it was a weird game. But, man, he's going to be involved.
Yeah, all three of the receivers. I mean, it was a weird game. They got crushed, but they kept their starters in. And all three of the receivers played full snap share. So I think we got a pretty decent read of what they're planning to do. I think they were trying to continue to get reps with Brown in the lineup. He ran routes on 80% of dropbacks. Godwin and Evans were both higher, but, I mean, 80% is a ton. It was very negative for Gronk, I would say. Now, that could have had something to do with the blowout. Maybe Gronk's the one guy that they wanted to put in bubble wrap, but basically Gronk's routes dropped down to a season low 44%, and they went to more 4 wide receiver sets and still included Scotty Miller. But they kind of treated the 3 receivers as full-time players and then did some other things with that additional skill position slot. But yeah, it didn't look like Brown was going to get rotated out a whole lot after that first game. Led the team in air yards with 99. Evans can't even get deep targets, but Brown was getting them right away. It was
and Miller still gets them when he's out there.
What's that?
Miller still gets them when he's out there.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Brown is probably, sort of running a lot of the routes that Miller runs. So,
Shawn, I haven't heard you. I don't think I've seen you talk too much about Antonio Brown. A few weeks ago, Pat, Ben, and I were battling the chat for about 30 minutes. They told us Antonio Brown was a league winner. We were highly skeptical.
What was it, 15% chance he was a league winner or something like that?
Yeah, it was a very high chance he was a league winner. Where are you at on Antonio Brown rest of season?
I think that when you look at how this offense this year with Tom Brady has hurt someone like a Chris Godwin, who really is a star, then you have to be concerned about players coming back and trying to do things that they haven't done a lot recently. I mean, this idea that everybody had that AJ Green is going to come back, and even though he's been going out of his way to not play for multiple seasons, that he's then going to be a star. We've seen how that can be difficult even when the volume is there, right? I mean, the Bengals anticipated him being their focal point, and then after a month, they're like, actually, we need to play the guys who are good, or we need to at least throw the ball in the direction of the guys who are good. And like you guys have been saying, the peripheral pieces in Tampa Bay have played well. You look at what happened this last week, where they just get absolutely hammered, and it looks like a thing where they've upset the rapport of the team in order to try and force Antonio Brown in there when their secondary guys were playing well. And then you have Bruce Arians come out and say that Mike Evans was open the entire game and Tom Brady didn't throw it to him. And that's something else that could be a little bit of a fly in the ointment for Brown going forward. You have the situation where Gronkowski drops the touchdown pass, or maybe his week would look a little bit different. But I think it's again a situation where if you had a roster spot, you were able to get Brown somewhat cheaply, you really need to do that because you need to have that exposure in case it goes that way. I don't think that's the most likely result.
And that's really what we said. What you were talking about with Evans, that's what we were saying a few weeks ago. Everyone was talking about Tom Brady loves Antonio Brown because he played that one game with him with the Patriots and he got 6 targets on 14 routes, something ridiculous, and that was a Patriots team that had no pass catchers. He came in and he was like the only NFL player, catching passes on that team. This is not that team. And we talked about this. We said he could have his big weeks, but everyone's going to have their moments in this offense. I don't think Evans is going away at all. I mean, why wouldn't Mike Evans continue to produce? I think it actually helps Evans, and I think that's the case we made a couple of weeks ago. So
hang on, Ben, but do you know that Antonio Brown has been living in Tom Brady's house? I mean, this is the narrative to end all narratives. They are taught, like, when he runs out of toilet paper, he tells Tom that they're out of toilet paper. I mean, what would forge a bond more than that?
I feel like having Antonio Brown live in your house is probably going to make you less likely to throw to him on the weekend.
Giselle is like, let's end this.
It's going to be a great 2 more weeks for Antonio Brown. Yeah. Everyone on the pod knows where I stand on this guy, but I want to get Ben and Shawn your thoughts on Reagor and the Eagles offense. Ben, where are you at?
I'm glad I got him in the fantasy football World Series because you apparently had to take Visca over him. I wanted Visca, but I wound up taking Reagor 1 pick later. Yeah, I think you got to be pretty optimistic about him.
Shawn?
Yeah, what he did in the first game there, and with the potential for that role to really expand, I think you can have 2 wide receivers start to play well there. Carson Wentz has taken a lot of criticism, and a lot of it is justified, and he's made a lot of Jameis Winston types of passes, and those will lose games for your reality team. At the same time, for your fantasy team, you want someone who is willing to keep fighting, who wants to put the team on his back, and who's willing to throw the ball down the field. I think as they get healthy, this Eagles team is going to be pretty fun.
Yeah. Hopefully, Pat and I, we took some big stances on Visca and Reagor, and I knew that patience would have to be, practiced here with these guys. We've been patient, and I just need one of them to hit. Visca obviously leaving the game early last week with the hamstring was crushing. It seemed like that game script set up for a ton of points. We see bang, bang touchdowns in the first 3 minutes. And Visca's on the bike the whole game, Ben.
I messaged Shawn in our main event team Sunday morning and started a discussion where we wound up playing Visca over DJ Chark.
Oh, no.
How many points did we lose by, Ben?
Oh, no.
So that was rough.
Did he send you the highlight reel, Shawn? Is that what pushed it over the top?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're like, if we don't play him, then we don't get the highlights when we go on the show, so. We lost by 0.3.
Oh,
God. That's disgusting. Is this your guys? You're in a main event?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you guys looking on that team?
Well, we lost that game by 0.3 because of giving up, 30 points on the Jaguars wide receivers. And we lost by less than a point about a month ago when Kenyon Drake decided to have a 75-yard run.
I've blocked that out. You've brought it up like 3 times since, but I have forgotten it every time until you make me relive it every time. Do you guys remember the Kenyon Drake run on Monday Night Football, the 60-yard run?
Yes, of course.
It literally beat us by, it could have been a 60-yard touchdown, and it was a 69-yard touchdown or whatever. It beat us by a couple of yards.
Anyway, you stayed up to the end of the blowout to see your loss.
Let's all rally on something we can get behind, and what an absolute unmitigated disaster robust running back has been this year, no matter which way you slice it. And Shawn has sliced it in a few ways here on RotoViz. Shawn, talk to the people about the charts they're seeing here up on the screen.
Well, we're looking at the scoring, and you can look at it in terms of points per game, or you can look at it full season, depending on what you think is more valuable. And obviously, I think the points matter, because if we're sort of anticipating that the top running backs are going to have a slightly higher injury rate, which history tells us is going to be the case, that does matter. Maybe you can fill in some other running backs, and so you can mitigate some of the damage there. But either way, we see that the wide receivers all across this entire range are scoring more points. Now, again, there are ways that you can look at it where perhaps, say you've got to start a second running back, But instead of taking that running back in round 2, try and get James Robinson, right? I mean, anybody who has him is going to be in the top 2 or 3 of their league, really, regardless of how they went about it. But when you're talking about leagues that allow you to start 4 wide receivers, which most leagues do, you have to load up on them in these rounds. And one of the things that you're seeing is that basically a 6th round wide receiver is the equivalent to a 2nd round running back. Taking wide receivers over running backs is essentially like just freely trading up multiple rounds in your draft. One of the things that I mentioned in the article, and a little bit on the OT that's coming out on Thursday, is that Blair Andrews has put together this really cool tool that allows you to go through and pick whatever year that you want and see what the wide receiver scoring relative to the running back scoring actually has been, right? And you have these monster gaps and you look at it and you're like, that just can't be true, because otherwise people would draft differently. And yet it is true, and it does continue on. I mean, maybe you're thinking, okay, well, enough running backs now have good situations. The offenses are moving in a direction where they're using running backs in a very favorable way around the goal line. And so we're going to have these scores. But basically, again, what we see is, it's McCaffrey, Kamara, Cook. It's those guys. Once you move out of that, you're just giving up massive numbers of points. And so, if you structure your team, and this year, again, you really did kind of need to have that single elite running back and to have one of those top 5 picks to get a shot at Kamara and Cook. The teams with those guys are just naturally going to have much better records than other teams, much higher average scores. But if you then combine that with a bunch of wide receivers, then your margins, your floor, and then your ceiling is so much higher. Unless
you play Laviska Shenault over TJ Chark when you have Kamara and a bunch of receivers.
I do think that some of the allure of drafting these running backs too highly is that you're talking yourself into getting another Kamara. It's that, like, it's because you see Cook and CMC and Kamara having these huge weeks that really we don't see from wide receivers. I mean, you sometimes see it from wide receivers, certainly from like Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. You've seen some huge weeks, but kind of week after week getting guys up in that like 23, 24 points per game range, there's that elite running back class that can do that. And I just feel like so much of it is that you can talk yourself into Kenyon Drake being that guy, or Josh Jacobs being that guy, or Miles Sanders being that guy, and you just keep selecting them. How much of it do you think comes down to kind of chasing that ceiling, or just people kind of fundamentally misunderstanding how points are scored?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that what you're saying is true, and we do see different points at which a running back will make the jump. And if you can get someone in that range and he makes the jump, then you're going to be in very, very good shape. However, the other part sort of at the top there talks about, not even necessarily in the dead zone, but that at that first, second round turn, that what we were projecting based on Blair's Win the Flex tool and based on Dave Cabin's range of outcomes tool, which is a sim scores tool looking at historical matches, using a combination of those tools to look at several different wide receiver starts when you're in those terrible draft slots, 9 to 12 versus running back starts. Even up there, you're getting just a huge gap if you go with the wide receivers. Now, what Blair and I have done with our team, where we have the 6 wide receiver stars and some of them are on the bench every week, and that helps you with the buys, but you still have to answer the question of where the running backs are going to come from. And if you answer it incorrectly, like we more or less have, then maybe you don't run away with your league that way either. You still have to start some running backs. And I think that's the thing people are looking at. At the same time, the points that those top wide receivers are scoring really does help you, and you can make some mistakes and you'll still be in it. But if you take Kenyon Drake, then you're in deep trouble.
It's funny. Shawn sent a nice email this week to me and Anthony and Miko, who are both doing well in the Scott Fishbowl tournament. And I jokingly wrote back that I see him in our rearview mirror because he's also, I think, in the top 30 overall. There's several RotoViz type guys up there. Pete, I know you're leading the Draft Sharks Invitational. That's another one where I've been getting tagged on it because I just moved in the top 10, even though I went modified 1 RB, and I think my next 2 running backs were Marlon Mack and Tariq Cohen, which, sharp picks there. I played Patrick Laird the other week.
Go on, King.
But I'm still in the top 10. The point I'm making is any of these tournaments you look around, and I've seen a lot of them, and I look around and I keep seeing the same similar types of names, the same Rotovizian types of minds at the tops of a lot of these leaderboards and a lot of these season-long leagues. A lot of people that follow this same mindset. It's successful. You just pulled up, this listener who's doing very well. Any strategy can be either good or bad. But this season, you can look at all the results. Anytime you see overall results in any of these big contests, I'm sure you're going to see people that have roots back at RotoViz that have these types of teams like Pete's pulling up right now. Those are the teams that are dominating this year, the ones that have avoided injuries as well, because it took that too this season. It's been a rough season, but this was clearly the dominant strategy.
Yeah, this is the team I know I'm biased because I'm in first out of 60 pros in this league, but we had done one with John Solis. He put on the George Floyd Invitational back earlier in the offseason, and I love this format. It's super flex, tight end premium in deep 25 round draft here, and it was one of those things where I grabbed the running back early. I prioritized an elite tight end. Say what you want about Mark Andrews. And then the other thing is I had remembered Blair writing his article about on the small data sample size in these super flex best balls that getting 3 quarterbacks before round 5 is a dominant strategy. I ended up pushing it back just because the room wasn't pushing them up as much. And then I just focused on stacking here as well, getting Kyler with Kirk. I got Carson Wentz coming on with Goddard and Reagor, Ryan Tannehill with A.J. Brown. And then the big thing that was the difference maker here is because it was so deep that I could go 25 rounds, I get Mike Davis in the 24th round. I get Jacob Hollister in the 25th round, who started for me at tight end this week. And again, this kind of shows I actually thought zero RB or modified in this format was even more viable because I'm throwing so many darts here. And I've gotten starting weeks from Rex Burkhead. And I have guys like, DeAndre Washington percolating, Rashad Penny percolating. But I do think back to Ben's point and what Shawn's saying, like just filling your roster with these wide receivers and these tight ends and these quarterbacks in this format and not wasting points on running backs in these rounds 2 through 14 has proved to be a dominant strategy.
It almost reminds me of like playing GPPs where, obviously you're going to draft a bunch in a season-long league. You're going to draft a ton of different players, but with this type of strategy, the running backs rounds 2 through 6, they kind of represent bad chalk, and the field likes those guys. But we're saying those are guys who are not worth their price. We're betting against them, and when the chalk fails, the strategy just eats. And that's, to Ben's point, you're seeing all these same names. Now, the problem is that, a week is a year in this. And last year we had the chalk hit. The running backs in the dead zone did surprisingly well. They still weren't great in best ball in terms of win rate, but I think everyone wanted to double down and take all those running backs in that same range. And if you kind of stuck to your guns, this has been a great year to have faded the running backs in those range, as Shawn's article shows.
Yeah,
well, I was trying to be the last person to select a running back in the fishbowl and did it in the 10-11 round range there, and then went and clicked on, the tool showing exactly where everybody was, and I see Anthony's name there. So I think that he was the last person to select a running back, and now he's in
and he's leading,
which is kind of fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. He's leading a 1,440 person tournament, and he was the last person to select the running back.
That's great.
And you were trying to be that, and you were right there with him. I took McCaffrey first overall, and then I took Ronald Jones in about the 7-8 turn. I guess.
Yeah, that's what I did.
8-9 turn. Yeah, and then I didn't take another one until like round 12, and that was it. I had one, and then one more, in the back half of the top 10 rounds, and then well into the double-digit rounds. I went back to receivers for a couple more rounds. Yeah. So,
and I'm in the top 10% after losing Saquon, but I picked up Mike Davis on the first round of waivers. It's like you could have your first pick whiff. I mean, and still be okay. It's been a dominant year for zero RB. It's been great.
I'm 63rd. I just checked in Scott Fishbowl. So
wow, look at
There's 1,400 people in this. Not everyone's in the top 100. Just all of them.
All right, guys. Any final words? Any final topics here before we wrap up this show?
What tight end do we get for our?
Good call. I should go back and refresh some of these here. Let's see here. So this is Robust OG. Let's see how we did here. We got Hollister. He wasn't a hot commodity. I'll put him in right now. Hollister, and then we picked up Hamler.
We didn't get Balazs. Who else did we get?
We got Hamler, I think was the addition, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, and we got New Orleans defense. Nice. I feel like the waivers are a little soft this week. If we're getting normally the grinders are out for the top defensive play of the week, and they let us get New Orleans here. Let's see what we did in some of these other. Let's see what we did in the quad. No one was on Ferkser. They let us have Ferkser. Imagine letting us get Anthony Ferkser. Let's see what we did in chasing OT here, Shawn. They didn't let us get New Orleans here. We did get some more Hamler. And we got Balazs here. We got Balazs. I mean, when we all go to bed tonight and we're laying awake and we're like, I can't sleep. And then you say, no, but I got Kalen Balazs. And then you can rest easy before you fall asleep. Let's see what we did here. In ship taking, this is a team that we have with Davis.
I also added a bid for Hollister here.
Okay. This team is crazy, guys. So, okay, we were talking about 0 RB victory laps.
Pull up the draft board.
Yeah. Oh my God, X is 9-0 still.
X
9-0. Look at his points against. He has no points against. The least points against in the entire league.
Shawn, this is the draft that got me drunk for 4 days. X waited until round 15 to draft his first wide receiver.
There you go.
If you want to mount an argument against 0 RB, you need Mr. X. You need the least points against in the league. go to scores so it shows the points for. Scores? Oh, here.
Go to scores. It'll sort by points.
Oh my God.
Okay, so he's 4th in points. He's actually not had that bad of a year.
1326 is fine. Yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah, Mr. X. But we're coming for him here with ship taking. This is one of our better teams. Another team that has that. Oh, this went back to. How did this happen here? This always happens when you're signed into multiple leagues here. I'll go back to this team that we have with Davis. And our team here, we lost Dak on this team, but our running backs are oddly good. You know, we have Alvin Kamara. We've been stashing Duke Johnson. We have Antonio Gibson. We have Myles Gaskin, who got hurt. We have Rojo, Zach Moss. And our big bugaboo here has been tight end, where we lost Zach Ertz. We did add Hollister here, which is nice as well. But again, the combo of Hopkins and Diggs, Shawn, Hopkins, Diggs, and DJ Chark. I mean, that's a wide receiver crew that makes you blush.
Before the game last week where the Cardinals decided they didn't need to beat the Dolphins, I guess, and didn't need to throw DeAndre Hopkins. That Kamara Hopkins there, the best guy at both positions, to be able to have Diggs in there with him, like we had earlier on the chat. Diggs in round 2 would have been a good pick.
Shout out to the RotoViz Strength of Schedule app, because that got us onto Daniel Jones. We needed some matchup based quarterback play heading down the stretch, so we grabbed Daniel Jones for cheap this week.
Yeah, we were looking here at the lineups here for Tua, so not too bad. Denver, New York Jets, Cincinnati coming up. Daniel Jones on bye in week 11, but also get Cincinnati and Seattle. So pretty nice schedule there to play Daniel Jones and Tua. I mean, we are now in that stretch where you need to be looking at individual matchups here for the playoffs and how that aligns with your specific onesie positions. So yeah, that is the deal. Every strategy can win if you miraculously pick the right players, ... But in the aggregate, 0 RB and drafting wide receivers has been the dominant strategy.
The interesting thing here is that Austin Eckler hurt, Melvin Gordon hurt-ish and not that great now.
None of these guys are good.
That's a fascinating team.
How was it? So it's Robbie Anderson, right? He's got
Robbie Anderson.
We've looked at this
Yeah.
before.
Let's go to X here. What has he got?
None of his running back picks have worked out, for the record. He's winning despite all of his early picks, except for the tight ends. He had Kelsey in the first round.
This is a fascinating team. I don't know how this team is undefeated.
I think he's a lock. Or no, he's not a lock. He needs to win this week to be a lock for the number 1 seed. But he has 2 games ahead of the guy behind him.
This is Travis Kelsey's doing. This feels like
Mahomes to Kelsey just wrecking for him. Yeah.
This week, here's the lineup this week. Phillip Rivers, Phillip Lindsay, Melvin Gordon. He's starting both of them. Corey Davis, Robbie Anderson, Tim Patrick, Cole Beasley, Hunter Henry. That's an undefeated team in the FFPC.
Anytime you can start 3 different Broncos, including 2 different running backs.
It's the grossest starting lineup, and yet he's going to be the 1 seed.
All right, guys. This has been super fun. Let me do some housekeeping here. Ben Gretch on the Stealing Signals. Check him out. Those drop in your inbox. I read it every single week before I do all of my research. We got Shawn Siegele. He's doing one of the Zero RB reports every week, in addition to another article looking at the dynasty landscape, other things that you need to pay attention to here for the home stretch. We got Pat Carrain doing stat chasing twice, once when he mutes himself.
So nice. I did it twice.
I remember when I got that tweet last night, and I was like, oh my God, when I have to tell Pat he needs to record.
I literally talked or something, and I muted myself on StreamYard and never unmuted, and then talked.
You tweeted it out before you realized this?
Yeah, dude, it was done.
The whole thing, yeah.
Oh no!
I muted myself 35 minutes into a 2-hour, 15-minute show.
I thought you figured it out.
Nope. Nope. Put it out for the people. Then came back and did it all again an hour later.
I even told Pat, I was like, dude, just screw it this week. Like, I wouldn't do it again. Pat's a grinder, man. He went back in there and re-recorded it.
I put it out.
Major props.
Yeah. So if that doesn't convince you, just like and subscribe to this damn channel. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. He spent literally 5 hours just recording stat chasing this week, in addition to all of the research. So subscribe to RotoViz, subscribe to Ship Tasting, and subscribe to Stealing Signals.
It's earned it.
We have earned it. We are grinders. Thank you guys for coming out. We will be back as usual every Wednesday. Thank you to Shawn. Thank you to Ben. Thank you to Pat. Good luck this week. We'll see you guys next time.